They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, and everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Well, first of all, time does sometimes stand still, Chris. As Saturday night, we went back to the time machine, went back to 2004 in Calgary Flames land, 20 years ago, as memories of Mika Kiprusoff and the Kiprusoff retirement jersey. The retirement ceremony happened. Second, of course, Devin, it won't be able. It'd be very hard to watch Chris Tanev live anymore, as of course he was traded to the Dallas Stars, and there's just no calmness in Calgary, Vancouver, or pretty much anywhere in the NHL. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com, Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com, Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com, Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio. Dan from Fireside Chat with us. Hello.
How you doing, Kev?
Well, good. Dan, I think there's a very important lesson that I want to start giving all podcasters. This is probably the most important lesson. When you start, make sure the live link is on and you hit go live before you talk for 20 minutes about a particular topic.
So we have the time machine going back 20 years and the time machine going back 20 minutes for both the Flames and our discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I need one of those flashback cards from a 90s sitcom.
Yes, exactly. 20 minutes ago. All right. Yeah. So it's that. So, of course, you guys have any comments, everything like that, post them in the chat. We will address them. But we'll start with the game last night, which, of course, they had the Saturday night, the Mickey Kiprusoff retirement ceremony, and quite frankly, a pretty incredible comeback victory of the Flames over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Dan, I'll just tell you what it was like for me watching here in Vancouver at home. It just felt like I haven't heard the Dome that loud in years, like years and years since I've heard the Dome really that loud. Of course, you had the Flames playoff run a couple of years ago to have that, but it just felt like it's been a very quiet place for the most part the last little while with all of everything that is going on. But it felt like a really special night from beginning to end. Just felt like, yeah, it felt like a really good family reunion.
It did, yeah. I mean, there was fans there all the way from when the doors opened at 5:30 that, the whole night was themed around Kipper. There was a large Kipper replica mask you could get a picture in front of. There's all sorts of banners all over the Dome. Like you said, it was a family reunion. I think we're going back to arguably probably the most important guy in Flames history, potentially, maybe the guy who saved this franchise. And I think the run of this team that everybody remembers fondly. And it's like you said, it's like a family reunion to go back that far. It was amazing to see old friends, old colleagues, and Flames fans, young, old, celebrating this player together. I haven't heard it that loud in a long time. I think the playoff run against Edmonton was the last time I was there that it was that loud, but it was amazing to hear. And even just, hearing the ovation for guys like Dion Phaneuf and Rhett Warrener. I mean, I don't think Rhett Warrener ever had that much applause for himself. It was amazing.
Robin Regier as well. Of course, Lanny McDonald, of course, Kiprusoff, the fourth Flame to have their jersey retired. Lanny McDonald, who unfortunately could not be there. All the best to Lanny McDonald.
He's sick when he's not there. Like Lanny's there for everything.
Yeah. Yes, he really is. And then you had Jerome McGinley, who was there last night, and Mike Verdon, who was there last night. And I think, one of the things that you talked about there about the 2004 run, like I was around for the 86 run. I was around for the 89 run. And for me, I think that one of the differences was the 86 and the 89 sort of had some expectations around what this team was going to be. I mean, you had, of course, some pretty significant trades in 1986, the Joe Mullen trade, the John Tonelli trade, the Nick Fotiu trade. And in the 1989, of course, you had they came off a President's Trophy year in 1988, and then you had 1989. You had another President's Trophy year. That was when you win the President's Trophy, you won the Stanley Cup kind of era. And there was sort of those teams were loaded. 2004, it was sort of, you're coming off the 1990s where it was
the Young Guns era, the one we're trying to forget.
Was the worst era of Flames history. Of course, you had the Young Guns era, which was a complete failure. I mean, other than the fact that you ended up with Jerome McGinley, it really didn't come out. And we had to save our Flames campaign. The Flames were close to moving. There was a lot of talk around that. Canadian teams at that point, the only two Canadian teams that were doing really well financially at that time were Toronto and Montreal. Edmonton was having their problems. Vancouver was having problems. Of course, the Winnipeg Jets, let's not forget, moved in the 90s to Atlanta at the time, and the Ottawa Senators were just growing some really...
The Nordiques moved, too.
What's that?
The Nordiques moved, too.
Right, that's right. The Quebec Nordiques became the Colorado Avalanche and won the Stanley Cup. And then you also had, during that era, in Patrick Law leaving for Montreal to Colorado as well. So there was a lot of things. And so that not only for Calgary, I think that 2004 run, I remember the stories of flags being Flames flags in Quebec, Ontario, all across Canada. It sort of became...
I remember that at the time, the Flames jersey, that was one of the first years they wore that Black Sea, became the highest selling jersey in the league.
Yeah, it did. And I also think it was, of course, it was in, I think, is another, and it was mentioned last night, it was in. I think there's a lot of...
And that's something that's United Flames fans for 20 years.
Yeah. And
Kev, I think back in the 80s too, this team, remember, was less than 10 years old, right? The Calgary Flames come to Calgary in 80. So I think you've still got this newness to the team in 86, 89. This is new. This is cool. By 2004, let's be honest, the Flames were really a bottom, basement dweller who couldn't compete with the US dollar as all the Canadian teams were. I mean, we had Glenn Featherstone and Todd Simpson and, Rico Fata and all these guys that were just here to, put bodies in Saddledome. And as you said, after the, Save the Flames campaign, having Mika Kiprusoff come in, not only saved pucks, I think he legitimately saved this franchise from relocation.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's it's one of those that you have to, it's the connector. Like, I think the 2011 Canucks are the Canucks connector. I think the 2004 Flames are that Flames fans connector, where you are able to bring everyone in.
And I think the Jerome story, he was a highly rated prospect the Flames got for, a big veteran. I think part of the great thing about Kipper's the story that he was a third string goaltender, right? Generally, when you're a third string goaltender, you get brought in to play backup. And, you kind of got to work your way up. Right time, right place. He came to Calgary. Daryl Sutter thought he knew what he had, and Kipper took that job and seized it and kept that starter job for 9 seasons, playing 70 games or more. Like, this guy came from obscurity and almost the pauper to the prince story.
Yeah. And I also think, Ron McLean brought this story up last night. It was after that trade was made, after the Flames lost to the Oilers and they couldn't make a save. They couldn't get the save. It was a Roman Turek injury. Jamie McLennan was the goalie. And I mean, kudos to him for laughing at himself for not being the goalie that the Flames needed. And Daryl said Ron McLean said he ran into Daryl and said, if you would have got a save, you would have won that game. And Daryl said, I'm working on that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that would change the course of history. And it's for those that are not Flame fans, I really think you need to look back at Mika Kiprusoff, because he's one of those guys that was far too, unfortunately, wasn't interested in talking to the media. He's very humble. I mean, that speech, I think, was the longest he ever spoke in the history of
his induction to the Finnish Hockey Hall of Fame was all of 13 words.
Yeah, he's not a big talker. And, I mean, you'll get guys like Roberto Luong, other guys that are Henrik Lundqvist, who are fantastic in front of a mic. Mika Kiprusoff
Greg
isn't.
Conroy, Jerome McGinley.
Yeah, Jamie McLeod. But just, I think, look back on what he did, and just look back.
And I think if you're a Flames fan outside of Calgary, you probably also didn't realize the impact he had and what he brought for hope to this team off the ice too. Like, it's great to see the amazing things he did on the ice, but especially in 2004, there was this energy about this guy. And every year, even when we knew the team wasn't very good, there's energy that Kipper could take the Flames to the promised land and that sort of thing. And, I think if you're a Flames fan living outside the city, you really don't understand what he meant to kids. I mean, number 34 became the default number given to minor hockey teams for their goalies at that time. Everybody wanted to be Kipper.
Yeah. And I thought one of the nice things that they did last night is bring up the goaltenders from all of the generations that were born in the year that Mika Kiprusoff became a Flame. I thought that was a really neat thing. And the Brendan Peters story, I think, was a great story as well.
Brendan Peters, for those who don't know, is the Kipper kid.
Yeah, the Kipper kid.
Now he paints goalie masks.
Yeah. What is he? 25?
Speaking of that, I was kind of hoping that Markstrom would don an old school Kipper mask or a look-alike old school Kipper mask last night.
I think Jacob Markstrom has a few other things on his mind that unfortunately I think brought that up. I was hoping they would wear the 2004 jerseys last night.
Yeah, I mean, they've already got the Blasty third. I don't know how many the league wants them to have. And I think there's a minimum number of games you got to wear for a jersey and that sort of thing.
Right, fair.
They've already got Blasty. They've already got the outdoor game. I don't know how many jerseys you're allowed to have.
Yeah, fair. That would have been a nice touch, or
sure. Even if for the warm-up ones they wore that 34 on it, but Kipper did wear this jersey.
He did. That's true. But I mean, it just the success was that black jersey
for sure. Yeah. Kev, before we go any further, I just thought I'd show everybody this was the cup they gave out of the cup they gave out at the Dome last night. Original 16. You got this really nice aluminum Kiprusoff cup, which is awesome. They didn't do something like that for the Jerome game. I like to call this my Cuppersoff. And I saw a number of people that probably had too much beer to get more of these. I saw a guy walking out here with 9 of them last night, and I thought, wow, I'm surprised this guy's still walking.
Yeah. So I think the other question that comes out of sort of the branch out of this question is what the Flames do when the next retirement is. And I have a few names that I think I want to bring up here. Okay, so the next two obvious names that I think will be debated for jersey retirement in current Flames lore that are playing are Mark Giordano, who was the captain of this team, and Michael Backlund. And I don't think either of them had a career that is going to tell me that they have a jersey retirement. I don't see it. It was good, not great, although Giordano did get a Norris trophy. So I wonder maybe.
But I don't know if one trophy makes you a guy you want to retire.
Yeah. But of course, there's two names that have come up quite regularly from the past. Two commons, and then we'll get to some other ones. Do you think Al McInnes ever gets his jersey retired?
I think that when the Flames move to a new building, you see the two numbers that right now are forever a Flame just get streamlined into the numbers that are up there. Because right now they've got this sort of two different looks of your forever Flame retired. I don't think they'll do another ceremony, but I think, they will sort of retire 2 and 25 and just put them in the rafters looking like the other two or the other 4.
Okay. So that's the other one is Nieuwendyk. Here's a few names from the past that I think that
before we go to the past, I think one guy that would have been up there if he stuck around would be Johnny Gaudreau. If Johnny Gaudreau would have re-signed in Calgary, I think you could make the banner up right now.
Yeah. And even I think there's a really good argument that Matthew Tkachuk would have had that same number. The same
I agree.
Thing yeah.
What about Theo?
I think Theo's comments, I think, I'm not going to get into a political debate about where Theo Fleury stands on things, but I don't think that the Flames ownership or even the league for that matter are completely comfortable with Theo's political leanings. And I think they would rather avoid it than participate. I think it does happen, but I think it's going to happen a few years down the road.
See, the thing about it is, you look at like last night, all the guys that have been retired, they're still the face of the organization. They're still there. They're still talking. They're still doing media stuff. I don't know the Flames want Theo to be that face of the organization. I think they gave him a great chance in 2009 when they brought him back for training camp. That building was so electric. I was at a few of those games to see Theo when he touched the puck, to have him back on the ice. I think the plan was bring him back for camp, cut him, and I mean, if he could play, great, but I think the plan was probably always cut him and then retire him. And he made some comments after that, reflected poorly on him and the organization. I think he kind of blew his chance.
Yeah. If it does happen, it's going to be a few years down the road. While we're at polarized in figures, what about Daryl Sutter, who made the Mika Kiprusoff trade, as we mentioned, coached the team in 2004. He got a loud cheer Saturday night in that building, for all of Flames Twitter that showed and social media that had this hatred for him. He's still a pretty popular figure in Calgary.
I think, when he got introduced last night, it was in the context of the 04 coach. It's sort of like Mike Vernon. Everybody remembers his first run. They don't remember him being there from 2000 2002 when he kind of stunk. Right. So I think, they were looking at him in a certain context last night. I don't know that. I mean, you can't retire Daryl's jersey, and I think the Flames need something. I don't think Forever Flame is the right thing, but the Vancouver Canucks have their Ring of Honor. Maybe the Flames need the Ring of Fire, and you can put guys like Daryl Sutter in there. Yeah. I think that even a guy like Craig Conroy, was he a good enough Calgary Flame to get raised to the rafters? No, but he's been around this organization. He's done great things for the community. He's the GM now. I think he deserves some recognition.
Yeah, and this is my idea. This is what I think. I go to what the Montreal Canadiens have done, and they have the Canadiens Hall of Fame. And it's not, you don't have to go to the game to go to the Canadiens Hall of Fame. It's just outside the Bell Center. And it's just a history of everybody that's played with the Montreal Canadiens. I think the Flames need to do that because, while Michael Backlund and Mark Giordano may not deserve a jersey to the rafters, Michael Backlund has contributed. Both of them have contributed tremendously into the community, as has Craig Conroy, who's basically spent his entire career on and off the ice with the Calgary Flames. I think that is important. The history part of this organization is important for general, and I think that even a guy like Robin Regier, he'll never have his number retired. He'll never be one of those forever a Flame. But I mean,
and I think if they're going to do a Hall of Fame like that, it'd be awesome if you could do a whole wing or section or whatever that looks like on that 04 roster. I mean, Oliwa and guys like that are never going to get their kudos, but were a big part of that roster. Mike Commodore, big part of that roster and that run. And, the fans wearing the red wigs. Like, I think those guys deserve credit for their role in that period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think it's really important for people to remember that. I mean, and there are fans now that were not alive in 2004. And I think that's an important part to kind of, I'll get into this a little bit more a little later. But I think that this is something that I think creates a successful culture in an expectation win. Now, I do want to bring up a few names from the past that I do think the Flames need to at least A, have to start mending fences, or B, address. One of them is Gary Roberts. Gary Roberts did have a 150 goal season with the Flames. He was him and Nieuwendyk and Lube were part of that 89 line that helped win the Stanley Cup. The fact that they haven't honored him yet, and they've honored both Nieuwendyk and Lube, I think is kind of sad.
They haven't really honored Lube.
Well, they kind of did a number of years ago, but he's, they sort of forever aflamed Lube, right?
But he's not up in the rafters.
Yeah.
And technically not the rafters, the air vent.
Right, fair.
In the Saddledome, the banners are not above the ice. They're on these air vents off to the side of the ice.
Yeah, I wonder where they put them in the new arena.
We don't even know what the new arena looks like. But I have to imagine it will be built with that in mind. I mean, with the Flames, with the Hitmen, with the Roughnecks, with the Wranglers, you're going to need a lot of spots for banners, and I think that will be addressed.
Yeah. A couple of other ones. I think they need to bend fences with Doug Gilmour. Doug Gilmour was probably one of the greatest trades in Flames history, and probably turned out to be one of the worst trades in Flames history as well when he was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But they don't win the cup without him. He was the Elias Lindholm before Elias Lindholm was cool. Him and Joey Mullen and Colin Patterson, that dice line was a really good line, and I think they need to bend fences with him. And one other person that I do think they have to honor, don't think that they've honored even remotely enough. And you go back to the Jaromir Jagr retirement ceremony. I don't know if I don't know if you saw that, but one of the things that they said it's a great day for hockey. That is former Flames coach Badger Bob Johnson, who got the team to the '86 Stanley Cup final. Was really the guy that was really on the analytics and some of the kind of these modern thoughts before a lot of other coaches were. He just thought this game of hockey. I don't think the Flames have really spoken enough about the contributions to this organization that Badger Bob has done. And I do think that is important to rectify.
Yeah, I think Badger Bob, and I think not now, but in 10 years, I think that if you're going to honor Badger Bob and Daryl Sutter, you need to put Brad Treliving in there. I think Brad Trelivin's probably, one of, if not top two GMs that have really changed the face of this franchise.
Yeah, him and Cliff Fletcher would be the top two. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know that people don't always want to talk about the past, but it's that past that kind of brings you to your future.
Yeah.
And I think that these are the things that, for the, I don't want to be the old crotchety man here, but for the younger crowd, I think it's important to remember these sort of.
And I think if you're going to do that, I mean, we have we have some hitmen jersey retirements like Brad Moran, who, became nothing. But I think if the Flames end up doing a museum, like you said, or a Hall of Fame, I think having what's now the Wranglers, but sort of their AHL Hall of Fame in there too, is a great way to honor guys. Maybe they didn't become a lot in the NHL, but let's still honor some of that great work from the organization.
Yeah. And I think that, just because someone doesn't become a star in the National Hockey League doesn't mean that they don't contribute. And it's because of guys like Michael Backlund, those Michael Backlund type of players. And well, Michael Backlund hasn't won a cup. They are sort of the fabric of the organization.
They are.
What you're kind of, I mean, Oiler fans will probably talk a lot about what Kevin Lowe and Ryan Smith meant to the organization. That's the same thing with Michael Backlund. So I think that
I think in Canada and Calgary especially, there's a lot of work this team does that's not on the ice. There's a lot of work this team does in the community and things like that. And I think that has to be honored as well. And they have some awards for that they give internally, but I think celebrating those players that, like you said, like a guy like Backlund or a guy like Giordano, who gave a lot of time and money to the community, would always be there for anything the Flames needed them for in the community, making the day of a lot of young kids. I mean, we even remember when Dougie Hamilton was here and would dress up like, Wonder Woman or whatever for the Children's Hospital. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on out of the rink that needs to be celebrated for this team as well. And I really believe that's a big reason they've stuck around as well, as they become not just a hockey team, but a fabric of this community.
Yeah. We'll address that as well. But the other thing that I think from the Kiprusoff part of this, I think the applause, he gave $34,000 to Calgary Minor Hockey last night. Yep. And he clearly didn't want that to be the focus, but I think it was great that Brendan Parker said that. And yeah, I thought it was just a great night. And then the Flames, for two periods, kind of were just in I think they were out getting some cupper coughs, and then in the second half of the third period, Nazem Kadri.
They deliver original 16 with skip the dish to the bench. I know they do in the lower bowl.
Yeah. And then Nazem Kadri put a nominee for goal of the year, definitely Flames goal of the year last night with that. And I saw someone post this morning, but I think can we give Jonathan Huberdeau a little bit of credit on that goal? Because he lifts the defenseman's stick that allowed Kadri to go in on Jarry and move in. So kudos to Huberdeau, who helped out with that. But yeah, Nazem Kadri continues to just he's trying to take this team on his back, and that was just a great moment. And Blake Coleman and Igor continues. It was a great second half, and it was a loud, nostalgic night, even in a way.
I know a lot of people, myself included, asked some questions about why pay Kadri what they're paying him. But I think he's shown that, yes, he might be a different type of player and maybe, not as productive, but he comes through in key minutes. And I think this will be a contract we're going to look back at the end and go, yes, we got value for him.
Yeah. I don't mind this contract at all.
And Kevin, if I can just point something out that I love from last night, the score ended up being 3-4.
Yes. And also, Igor Sharangovich scored 2 goals. What's 17 times 2, Dan?
34.
There we go. Yeah, it was.
And I think Sharangovich too. We're talking about highlights last night. Sharangovich, what a turnaround this guy's had, right? I mean, a guy who came onto the team playing fourth line minutes at the beginning of the season. I think one of the most important Flames right now.
Yeah, he keeps getting better game after game, and I think he has the potential to be a really solid 200-foot player that is just getting. He's just getting more comfortable in who he is. And I guess we'll get into the trade part, but I think this is it will probably go down as one of Conroy's better trades, which I guess now we turn to the trade deadline, of course, is Friday. So about 5 days away. And we'll start with another trade happened with the Chris Tanev, who, of course, was traded to the Dallas Stars on Thursday for a second-round pick, a defenseman named Artem Greshnikov, who apparently all of Twitter, who have never seen him before, did not think he was a good prospect. But NHL scouts who did see him did. But, of course, I'm really surprised, Dan, that a lot of those Twitter scouts that have never seen him are not working for an NHL team. It really surprises me. And of course, this also included a conditional third-round pick that if the Dallas Stars get to the Stanley Cup final, the Flames get. Now, there was a lot of. I'll start with me. I was going to be honest, it felt a little bit. I thought we were going to get a little more here for Chris Tanev, but I think ultimately I ended up liking this. I don't think it was realistic to expect a first-round pick. I think if this was in Edmonton, Vancouver, Toronto, I think that they wouldn't be insisting on a first-round pick. But you got a second-round pick, which now you have 5 picks in the first 2 rounds of this year's draft. You've got a guy that, I think whether he plays in the NHL or not, he seems like to bring a physical presence, which I think Greg Conroy is trying to identify as part of the identity of this team and this defense going forward. So we got a guy that maybe it's not this offensive, sexy guy, but this is a guy you need. This is the type of player that you need to be successful in terms of the style.
Conroy's pretty much told us the stats don't tell the story on this kid because he is a two-way defensive defenseman type. Like, he's not putting up the numbers, but Craig thinks he brings a lot of things that aren't measured on the stat sheet.
Exactly. Yeah. And the Flames don't really have, we'll see where Soligov and Kuznetsov are, but the top defensive prospects on this team are more offensive. And Jerome Poirier, who might be playing this week here with the Wranglers, there's still work that needs to be done on his defensive game.
And he's missed almost a whole season. I don't think you can bring him up to the NHL next year. I think you've got to sort of make up that season in the American League of lost development.
Yeah, exactly. So you've filled the depth of this organization in some way, shape, or form. And if you end up getting an extra third-round pick, you end up getting an extra third-round pick. I think it's solid. It's not. Is it the home run? No. Is it but it's I think it's a really good hit. And this was a guy that, by the way, was picked right after Logan Stankoven in that 2020 in that draft. It was Logan Stankoven, and then shortly after was Grishnikov. He got basically 2 seconds essentially, and a guy that's ahead in terms of development. I don't think that this is a bad deal for Chris Tanev.
Yeah, we haven't heard of this prospect, but Okay, let me back up a little bit. I don't think you were going to get a first as a rental for Tanev. This is a guy who has only played 70 games one time in his career in one season. It was 14-15. Like, he's a guy who's oft injured. And I think when the Flames made their run a couple years ago with Dallas and Edmonton, he was out, you really felt it. And I think that because of some of those reliability issues, if I'm a GM, I'm not giving up a first-round asset for a guy. I don't even know if he'll be there for me for the playoffs. I think you ask for a first, but the way the league works, say, hey, we want a first. Okay, let's do it. Like, I think the Flames got a good return. Couple things I was surprised about. I don't think the second's a bad deal. I like the second. I think it's a fair deal plus something. I was surprised that the third goes completely away if they don't make the cup. Like, I was kind of expecting it to be more tied to Tanev's performance. Like, if Tanev plays 10 playoff games, you get the third. If not, you get a fifth. And I was kind of surprised it just goes away entirely if nothing happens there. I kind of thought it'd be like a second and a fourth, and the fourth could be upgraded to a third type thing. This defenseman, I don't know a lot about, but neither did I and the guys they brought over in the Vancouver deal. And you got to remember that Conroy's job before he became GM was really that of a talent scout. And if you like, we talked earlier about Sharon Govich. We've talked about some of the other players he's brought in the past. If you trust Daryl, or if you trust Conroy's talent scouting, you have to assume that he knows what he's doing from this guy. And with the team taking a bit of a step backwards, I'd be surprised if this guy wasn't given an NHL opportunity, even as a 6-7 down the road.
Yeah, I could see him playing a few games next season. I don't see him getting in a lineup this year, but I think next year
I think the big key to this is the second round pick. And I mean, we've seen what the Flames can do with thirds, fourths, fifths in the past. Whether they make this pick or they end up using it as currency, I think just having that option and having that ability to bring in another top player, you should get an NHLer out of a second round pick.
I would agree with that in terms of
and
that.
I think the Flames are probably going to need a target defenseman in the draft, so let's call that another young D-man coming into the organization.
Yeah, and the Flames have done really well. I mean, in terms of those mid-round picks, you talk about thirds and fourth. Craig Conroy's always said that, like, one of the things that Craig Conroy said in that opening press conference was, "I trust my scouting staff. I have no worries with my scouting staff."
For sure,
like, there was nothing like of all the things that they've been working on around that organization. The one place they didn't touch was the scouting staff. So there's a big trust in terms of that. So. Yeah, is this guy going?
And if you're trying to bring in an A prospect or a number one prospect, it's going to cost you a lot more. You're not going to get that for Tanev. I think Sharon Govich and maybe one of the guys from the Vancouver deal and this guy. I think that Craig is trying to target those under the radar guys that you're going to pay less for, but can develop into something better.
Yeah, and
because he's willing to be patient.
Just to go back just quickly to the history part of the Flames, the players that have the players like Jonathan Huberdeau or a Gary Leeman or a Kelly Kissio or any of these guys that came in with James Neal as another example, that came in with this big contract and this big expectation, they don't seem to connect with the Flame fan base. But with the Flame, the type of players like that come in with little fanfare, Mika Kiprusoff, Igor Sharon, possible, exactly. They seem to develop a relationship with this Flame fan base because they grow into their role. And I think that Conroy has identified that and even Jerome McGinley. Jerome McGinley didn't come in with a lot of, he didn't come in with people thinking that he was going to be the Jerome McGinley we knew and loved. We thought, good prospect, we'll see what happens. But, so that's kind of, I think, what Conroy is identifying here as part of that identity that I think he's trying to bring the Flames up to.
Yep. And I think if you look at the Calgary Flames have not had a first and second round pick a number of times in the last couple of years. I mean, Tree was very well known for dealing that pick for veterans and whatnot. So I think they've gotten better at drafting late in the draft. But, I think all those guys you mentioned with big contracts, the big difference to me is Kissio was not a superstar, right? Brouwer, James Neal, the Flames have a tendency to bring in big deals that don't end up being the big player. And we look at guys like Theo. We look at guys like Johnny, a fourth-round pick, right? We look at guys like Kachuk, their own pick. There's a lot of fanfare right now over Coronado. Like, I think fans like the homegrown talent, the guys they feel like they found and developed themselves. And I think in this market, for better or for worse, the Flames have shown that just bringing in the big deal isn't, I mean, Huberdeau is a great example, isn't always what's going to get you the best player.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
But at the same time, the Flames have never had that top pick. I mean, the close they picked is 4th, right? To be able to really build that superstar in-house. So you have to go out and try to find them elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that is the Tanev situation. Now with the team, like I think we'll get to the second part of these comments, but it certainly felt like that Flames dressing room and really the first 2 periods, they were missing Chris Tanev. They were absolutely missing him. I mean, I kind of feel for both Mackenzie Weegar and Noah Hanifin because you're playing them together for probably at most 2 more games. And they're probably not because, I mean, I think we can safely assume Noah Hanifin won't be wearing a Calgary Flames jersey after Friday. So,
well, and that's an interesting topic too. So the Flames have 2 more games till the deadline. They have tomorrow night in the Dome, and then they go away to Tampa Bay. I don't know that you take a guy on your road trip that you're intending to trade. That seems kind of not a great move. And because of that, I'm not sure that, I mean, I think if Hanifin plays in the Dome against Seattle, that's probably his last game as a Flame, but I don't even know if I'd play him. I think they might end up sitting him for that one.
Well, I mean, your next game is against Tampa and on the road, and no one wants to play in Tampa, so maybe he hitches a ride. It doesn't. I mean,
do you take future races or give him a ride to Tampa?
Yeah, here. See you later.
It's going to cost you 7th if you want us to put him on our plane, right?
Yeah.
But if he's not going to Tampa, I wouldn't want to bring him on a road trip and then the guy's stranded when he gets a trade, if that makes sense. Like, I think it's always better to trade a guy when they're at home.
Yeah.
And he's getting traded. I mean, I think if he was back, he'd be signed by now. Like, I've heard people say, maybe he re-signs. I don't think it looks good for the organization if he re-signs at the 11th hour on trade deadline day.
I think they did make another run at both Tanev and Hanifin. I think they did, but it's just ultimately, I think it was just too late down the road for both.
And Tanev even said in his exit comments that, he sort of insinuated the door would be open to come back to Calgary in the offseason.
Yeah, I don't think that this is, I know that I think that I'm 90% believe and that Tanev would want to come back to Vancouver, but I don't think that he hated his time here in Calgary at all. At all. I do think that there would be room. I think the problem is he wants $5 million, and I think it's going to be hard for either team to put that.
I don't think anybody would pay a 35-year-old Chris Tanev that.
Yeah. But if you're Dallas, just back to Tanev quickly here, and you talk about that conditional 3rd-round pick, how confident are you, if you're of a Dallas Star fan, that you are getting to the final?
I think they might have 1 or 2 more moves to make, but I think Dallas will be in the final 4 teams. I don't know if they make the final 2, but I think they'll make the Western Conference final.
Yeah, I think, and I would give them a good chance against any of the 3 teams in the Pacific Division: Edmonton, Vegas, Vancouver. I would.
My worry for Dallas is I think that if they lose Ottinger, they're probably done.
Well, Wedgwood has been good, but he's not Ottinger. You're right. But Ottinger didn't have a great playoff last year against Seattle.
But they also didn't go as far last year.
There you go. Yeah. Well, they got to the Western Conference final.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, they crapped out there. I don't know. We'll see. I think this might be one of Dallas's. I think they've got 2 or 3 years with this core, and I think they're doing what we used to see Tampa do every year too around the deadline, is just load up with veterans and try to make a run for it. And I think they know they've got to do that. I think they still need 1 more defenseman if they're going to go all the way.
Yeah, I think Colorado and Winnipeg are both very tough for them. They're going to be very tough for them.
I would love to see Dallas, Colorado in the Western Conference Finals.
Well, you're not going to.
Oh, that's right. 3rd round. Yeah, we could see. Yeah, you're right. I'm just thinking who's in what division now. I think Dallas beats any Western or any Pacific team.
Yeah, I actually would agree. And that includes Vancouver right now. Yeah.
Yep. I don't think this is Vancouver's year. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think they're on an upward trajectory, but I don't think this is their year.
I think with Vancouver, the big thing is both the Oilers and Vegas have playoff experience in front of them. And the other thing that Vancouver is going to have to run into here is Nashville is unbelievably hot and confident right now. And the LA Kings are an experienced team. I'm not entirely convinced that I still don't know if the Kings make the playoffs, but I don't know if I think that they will be a tough first round competition too. So it's tough. But the other part of the conversation from the media availability from Friday was Jacob Markstrom. And now, of course, everyone is blaming Eric Francis for asking this question, but Jacob Markstrom answered the question as honestly as he can. And he basically essentially said, respect the players in the room, but I'm not happy with up top. Now, he didn't specifically say that was A, Craig Conroy, or B, ownership, but we'll just go back to the
fans in the press level.
Yeah, that's actually true. That's true. Or was that Derek Wills and Megan Mickelson?
Could
or
be.
Rick Ball and Kelly Rudy? They are up top.
They are.
I think they have to be on the table.
That's right. Maybe they got to be traded.
Yeah. Although Megan has done a phenomenal, just sidebar. Megan is doing a phenomenal job as a commentator. She really is.
I see a lot of, and I don't want this to sound sexist at all. I see a lot of female commentators who come in and need some work, and it seems like they just kind of stall and need that work for a number of years. And she's come in. She was a little bit raw at the beginning, but she now sounds like a very seasoned broadcaster.
And she just does such a great job of nerding the stats out of. Like, she's taken a lot of.
She does, but still making them approachable. Like, she's not like PDO podcast level where you got to be a hockey nerd to understand this.
Yeah. She does a lot of what she reminds me a little bit of Allison Lucan from Seattle, just very much in sort of that kind of style in terms of her analysis. Anyway, she's doing a great job. So kudos to her. And we're making a joke that that's what Jacob Markstrom said. But Jacob Markstrom was upset. And I go back to the game against San Jose, where Dustin Wolf played that game and the Flames lost to the Sharks. And it felt for a lot of people that there was something up with Markstrom in terms of a potential trade, and it didn't happen. And I think ultimately, the reports are fair that this is about salary retention, but I think that Markstrom has a point. I think the way that Elliot Friedman is reporting this, I think feels connected to me. They approached Markstrom. It sounds like they approached Markstrom on a potential trade. They got his mind going in some sort of a direction. And I think Markstrom wished, you know what? You shouldn't, unless it was dead set this was going to happen, you shouldn't have brought it up. I think that's where Jacob is at.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I think, like you said, you're approaching a guy with a no move or no movement clause, full no movement, who has that clause because he doesn't want to go anywhere. So when you're coming to him saying, Jacob, can you waive this? I have to have a feeling he's probably now having a discussion with the wife, who they both have a new child at home. Hey, honey, I'm not going to be there. They're looking to move me. And I would imagine starting that mental process. And you're right. It could very well be, hey, don't come to me if this isn't, if the salary retention should have been on the table as part of the deal before you went to Jacob.
Yeah. And
I think that could be it. I think there's also been a lot of rumors about Markstrom this year, and I think maybe he's. I mean, who knows? I think maybe he's concerned about the way the team hasn't maybe struck them down. The team has never really said we're not moving Markstrom. Maybe that's what he's disappointed about from above as well.
They haven't backed him up.
No, and I think, we've seen GMs in other markets who've come out and say our goaltender's not moving. Our goaltender's a key part of this team. Jacob is not going anywhere. And I think maybe that's where Markstrom's coming from as well. And it could also be a number of things, death by 1,000 cuts. It could be that. It could be the New Jersey trade. It could be, the way that ownership's handling things. I think maybe it's just feeling like he's not supported in his net from everybody above him.
Well, let me put this in two different perspectives here and see. You just lost one of the player he said the best player he's ever played with in Chris Tanev. He lost his close friend in Elias Lindholm. You're seeing Noah Hanifin it has 1 foot out the door. We've already talked about that. You kind of see the writing on the wall. So from the inside the dressing room, you see some confusion. But I got to tell you, Dan, I think that there's been a lot of disrespect from the fan base about Jacob Markstrom. He is playing the best goaltender since the guy that had his jersey retired last night. This has been some unbelievable goaltending this year. And it may not end up in the Flames in the playoffs, but after the rough year he had in last year and everything that happened, he's arguably the Flames MVP. He's arguably in the Vezina conversation, and the Flames are in a playoff position. I think that there would be conversation around him in the Hart conversation. And this is a fan base that is like, well, we better trade him now because we're going to maximize our assets. I just feel that this has been a really disrespectful year for Jacob Markstrom inside that dressing room and around the community. And you can't tell me that he's not affected by that. And I understand he's a professional, but
I get where you're coming from, Kevin. But yeah, he's having a great season this year, but he stunk last year. Like I don't know. I put him in the same category as Mika Kiprusoff, who never really had an off season.
No, I'm saying this year has been the best year of goaltending that the Flames have had.
I'll go with that. But I think if like you're mentioning the guys that they moved, it's not like these guys got moved out of nowhere. I think we all knew coming into the season, none of those names would be here at the deadline. So yes, Tanev's gone. Yes, his buddy in Lindholm's gone, but we knew that was coming. Jacob had to know that was coming. Craig told us that was coming in the offseason. So yeah, you lost your friends, but you knew you were going to lose them.
But I wonder if Markstrom was like, you know what, I got one more year here, and then we'll have an off-season conversation about what happens next year.
Yeah, and that very well could be. And, they still probably will. I think that the media has made more of moving Markstrom than the organization has. I think this is one thing we have to remember about the Calgary fan base. Between the radio, between the pundits, between podcasts like yours and ours, this market wants to talk about the Flames. And I think sometimes, especially with the radio, where they have to do so many hours a day, they need to find content. And we never really heard the team or team officials address the Markstrom deal. It was always kind of, Boomer and Warner or Fan 960, those guys go, I wonder if they should explore this, I think, as a way to fill some airtime. I think everybody globbed onto it. But I don't think it's unfair to say, yeah, he's doing the best he's ever done. Let's sell while we're ahead.
Yeah, and I think that would then go to connect your argument that it's been management never backed him up, and I think that rubbed him the wrong way.
Yeah, I think, when all those rumors came out, if they had no intent of moving him, they should have come out and said, we stand behind Jacob Markstrom for this season.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's going to want to be back next year. Like if this team, like you said, if all these guys have moved, we'll see what else happens. If this team's taking a step back, he's 34. I mean, he may want to go somewhere he can chase a cup or something like that. I also think not only is he playing his best, but I think this is the first year in a while you've had some serious contenders have serious goaltending issues. New Jersey, LA, that sort of thing. Like I think LA's fallen down the standings because, we've tried Cam Talbot, we've tried David Riddick. They're not NHL starters, right? So, I think that if you're the Flames and you're seeing that, you'd be foolish not to at least look into it. And if you can get the right deal, we have to remember these guys are business assets. Jacob has the right to say no, right? The Flames can't move him if he doesn't want to go. But if they get the right deal, why not ask him? Who doesn't want to go to a contender?
Yeah, I think that it probably should have been further down the road than it was, though.
For sure. And we also don't know where it fell apart, right? Maybe they had a deal. I'm just going to make some up here. Maybe they had a deal at 25% retention, or they had some deal like the Tanev deal where, another team's going to pick up part of it. Maybe that team backed out. Right? Maybe New Jersey needed to come back and change the percentage. Like, I don't think all of a sudden New Jersey goes, oh, by the way, you got to eat $3 million. Like, that to me seems like something you've talked about ahead of time. My guess is it's something like the Tanev deal where a third team was involved. They were going to eat some of the money. They backed out.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some people that had this speculation as well. They went to Murray Edwards, they went to ownership with this and said, "No, I'm not. You don't want to retain salary." I think that's up there too. Maybe
It could be, but I have to imagine if I'm Craig Conroy. I mean, we've heard, stories in the past of, oh, the Flames wanted to make this deal or that deal. I mean, there was a deal for Ben Bishop back in the day that they couldn't do because Ken King was in an airplane. I think those are the kind of conversations you've had with ownership before you go into the season, especially if we're coming down to, this crunch time for trades. I think you kind of ask, okay, what are we willing to do where?
Yeah.
And if I'm Murray Edwards, I mean, in the end, it's still in my budget, right? You're not asking me for $3 million more. I mean, I was planning to pay this guy $6 million. So I don't know how much Edwards cares if he's not opening the pocketbook even more.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's, he is, you talk about polarizing figures right now. Murray Edwards seems, and you get that way with, owners when you're not successful, and he's kind of one of those guys right now that is kind of,
you get that. I think everybody wants a scapegoat. Sometimes it's the GM, sometimes it's the coach. I think here it's the owner, and I think in some markets the owner's much more visible than they are in Calgary. I mean, Calgary had Ken King as sort of the owner's representative for years, and he was the guy that took the crap, right? And for all we know, he was just taking directive from Murray and the ownership group. And I think right now the Flames don't have that. Technically, that is probably Don Maloney or John Bean, but they're not visible. And I think the Flames fan base wants somebody to be the bad guy, and Murray Edwards is convenient.
Yeah. Craig Conroy's too loved to be the bad guy at this point. You've got Jerome McGinley that's in there.
We fired the bad guy coach. Like, we got rid of a bad guy, so you got to move it up the lineup. Don Maloney's not a bad guy.
No. Yeah. Right. And I think going forward, I thought it was, I'm a guy that could read too much into anything, but I thought there was some interesting symbolism last night. You had Conroy and Iginla sitting beside each other, and you had Nonis and Don Maloney sitting beside each other. And
Conroy was on one side of the stage and Jerome was on the other.
No, in the press box last night.
Oh,
Conroy
okay, in the press box
together. Maloney and Nonis sitting together. I think there's some interesting symbolism of I'm not saying.
Well, I mean, Conroy is officially the special advisor to the GM, so he probably needs to sit next to the GM so he can provide special advice.
Yes. Just
right?
to kind of,
if he's sitting on the other side, how can he advise Craig Conroy specially?
Yeah, exactly.
And remember, those two are friends. They're sitting in the press box. I think we're probably reading too much into who's sitting where. We're sitting and watching a hockey game.
Yeah.
I don't think that's where a lot of business is being done is, during the hockey game on Kipper celebration night.
I do think I'm in particularly intrigued and excited about what Jerome McGinley, when he gets into this organization, it's going to contribute. I really do believe that it is going to be important. So
I think Jerome is going to be to Conroy what Conroy was to Treliving, if that makes sense. Like, Conroy was always kind of seen as the AGM that would do all the scouting, that would, advise on player personnel. He'd be the guy going on looking at young kids. I think Jerome's going to be that for Conroy. Yeah.
So just to recap what has already been done before, and this is before the Hanifin and it is possible that Markstrom could be traded by March the 8th here. So the Flames have sent out Lindholm, Toffoli, Zadorov, and Tanev for Sharangovich, Kuzmenko, who he got off to a good start, not playing a lot lately. A 2024 first, a 2024 second, a 2023 third, a 2026 third, 2 conditional picks, one 2026 third round pick, one 2024, 2024 fifth. Hunter Brskewicz, Artem Grishnikov, and Yoni Urmo. So that is actually not, when you look at that is not a terrible haul for what has been done here. That's pretty solid. There's, you got a guy that I think is becoming, you certainly have the two key guys in there, I think, are ultimately going to be Sharangovich and Brskewicz. And then, of course, we'll see what the draft picks, but that's not bad. That's not a bad start, I don't think.
No, and I think it comes down to you're definitely bringing in futures. A lot of these are unknown pieces, like the draft picks or prospects or that sort of thing. I think that yes, it's not a bad start. I think it's a great start, but I think you have to admit that, yeah, we're bringing in futures on this one. And we have a ton of futures there. They're not all going to hit. But if, 2 or 3 of them can, become top 6 forwards or top 4 defensemen, I think we've won here.
Yeah. Which leads me to what I was going to
But it's going to take, I think, 10, 20 years to really figure out if all these were good or not, because we have a lot of futures. We're going to see how they pan out.
Yeah. So I went shopping today, Dan, this morning, and I went looking for some magic beans. I found beans, but I didn't find any magic beans.
Heinz beans?
Unfortunately. I found Heinz beans. Because
do you not have a sticky note where you could just put magic over Heinz?
I could have, I guess. That's a good point. Because I'm looking for these magic beans because I seem to be seeing them for sale on the internet, Dan, and I'm seeing them specifically on Flames Twitter, who have this grandiose idea, a lot of Flames Twitter, that if you do all of this retooling and you just tank for a couple of years, by the time 2027 comes, the sun will be out and we will live happily ever after, and we will be dancing in the streets of Calgary, even in the snow, barefoot.
On the Red Mile.
On the Red Mile. Uphill, both ways, while I'm at it. I want to give some realistic expectations to what is happening here. And I want to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Do you know the last time the Buffalo Sabres did not pick in the top 10?
I have no idea. The year they brought in Tujimoto.
2013.
Okay.
Do you know the last time that the Buffalo Sabres finished ahead of the Boston Bruins in the standings?
2013.
2010.
Okay.
Do you know the last time the Arizona Coyotes have finished ahead of the Dallas Stars?
Probably the last time they sold out an NHL crowd.
No, it was a little after that. I don't think they've ever sold out one. So I think that's around 2009, 2010, and they were only 2 points ahead of the Dallas Stars at that particular time. Do you know how many playoff games Brady Tkachuk has played in his career?
5.
0.
Okay.
People are coming along with this magic bean tankathon. Oh my God, everything is all going to work out if we just tank for a couple of years. The reality of this situation is this is a long, arduous process. The Vancouver Canucks, by the way, the other team we talk about, are about to play their first playoff home game since 2015. That is 9 years. The Edmonton Oilers, with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl at the helm, have yet to finish first in the Pacific Division. The Winnipeg Jets have stumbled along.
Not just yet to finish first. The Oilers really haven't made it, anywhere close to the cup with those guys.
Well, they got to the Western Conference Final a couple years ago, but,
Okay, yeah, once.
Okay. It is not... And I want to bring up a couple of other things that people are bringing up as well. Well, the Vegas Golden Knights had a top 10 pick, and they're in the Stanley Cup final. They won the cup. The New York Rangers have the top number 1 pick. They're doing really well. Look at all these teams. They either, let's look back in this realistically here. The Colorado Avalanche collapsed because Patrick Waugh walked out of them just before the season started. And that's why they were able to get Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. The New York Rangers got Alexis Lafreniere because of a lottery glitch in 2020. Sidney Crosby became a Pittsburgh Penguin because of a lottery in 2006. This is not something that you keep thinking that if we're horrible, everything is going to turn out all right. This is a long, arduous process. And by the way, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Colorado Avalanche and the Washington Capitals had significant failures, significant collapses before they were able to get a damn cup. If you think that this is going to be easy, you've got another thing coming. This is a 5 to 10 year serious process at this point. And to say that it is not is absolutely unrealistic. And this tankathon bullshit that is going on the Flames Twitter needs to stop. It's poorly researched. It does not have any context, and it's just content creation. And it really bugs me that this is becoming part of the vernacular here. This is why you go back to history, because if you have a team with an identity, you will win more games than not. And that's why the Boston Bruins are successful. That's why the Dallas Stars are successful. And that is why teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, Pittsburgh Penguins, all of these teams continue to be successful, is because they know who the hell they are. And the Flames still are trying to figure that out.
The Flames are trying to figure that out, and I've never liked this. And you and I have talked about this before. I think it's terrible to say, let's tank. Let's become deliberately bad. I think we all know that you need to be bad to be good in the NHL. You need to get those top picks. You need a couple years of being bad, but I don't think you want to race to being bad. I mean, for a lot of teams, it's the way things work. And I think Pittsburgh's on its way there too. You know, like we've got older players that are going to be retiring soon, and you go through cycles. And the Flames have never gone through that cycle. The Flames have never gone through a real rebuild. I don't think now is a real rebuild either. They're not going to have a top 4 or top 5 pick for that. And I think there's lots of ways to do this, but I think that the Flames do need to step back for a couple of years. I don't think they need a tank, but they need to play young players. We know that when we play guys that are inexperienced, we may not get the same success, and that's okay. But you need to get those guys in the NHL. You need to get them playing. You need to get them learning. And, you need to slowly build that up. Do I think by the new rink, they can be a playoff team? Yes. Do I think that they will host Lord Stanley's mug the first year in the new rink? No.
My thing about that, the thing is I agree with you. I do think they need to get younger, and I do think that they're going to be bad. Like, I don't think that is any question. I think that it's quite likely they get a top 10 pick next year. I think that is a realistic expectation that they will be a bottom feeder for the next couple of years. I think we all know where this is going, but my thing is you still need to tell Martin Prospero, Carter Zeri, Matt Coronado, Dustin Wolf, all of these young players, you need to win hockey games. It's not acceptable to lose. We understand that there's growing pains, but we want you to try to win every damn hockey game.
And I think even this year, after they trade all their veterans that they're going to trade, if you can make the playoffs, great. It gives you some experience. But you go in almost like the 2004 team with no expectations and see what happens.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And and the Flames, just to go back to the start of the conversation, that 2004 team was successful because they had an identity. And it's been something that hasn't really clicked entirely. There was the Find a Way Flames in 2015, which
I don't think Find a Way is an identity.
No, it isn't. But that was sort of Derek Wills maintaining that sort of started that. But they don't have that identity anymore. We don't know what it means to wear a Calgary Flames jersey.
Really, since Daryl Sutter was the GM, we didn't really know what the Flames' identity was. When Daryl Sutter was the GM, they were that sort of, tough, heavy Western Canadian team with the things we kept hearing.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, honestly, Kevin, they haven't even known what they are. I think that, under Brad Treliving, he was told to try to get to the playoffs. And I think he was just slotting in pieces to try and get there. I don't think they had a plan. I don't think they had an identity. It was, wow, this guy's available. Let's bring him in. We'll figure out how to make it work. Or, wow, we can bring in this big player. Let's do that. And I think it was really a collection of parts more than a solid, here's who we are. And I think that's a lot of the reason guys have been frustrated here as well. Guys don't know who they are or what they're doing or how they fit into the organization.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that Nazem Kadri has added this year is the quote he said after the All-Star break was, "We're a pack of hyenas." And I actually like that. I kind of think that is such an interesting dichotomy into what the Flames are becoming. I think Kadri is wearing an A permanently in next year. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, but I just want to just backtrack on this quickly a little bit here. I think he's wearing an A in this jersey next season. I think
he wears an A until Backlund's gone, and then he wears the C.
Yeah. And also, I think Mackenzie Weegar deserves some credit of being a guy. I think it's just so unfortunate that he was part of the Matthew Tkachuk trade because he's been really good. He's been really solid for the 2 seasons he's been here with the Flames. So, but he's been kind of a guy that's taken some leadership as well. So,
And going back to what we talked about on Markstrom, if you are Craig Conroy and the goaltending staff here, and you go into the offseason, you say to Markstrom, Marky, you're 34. We're going to be bad next year. You want to come back? The answer is no, right? I mean, who wants to be part of that? And that's how you get guys to leave. And, a guy like Kadri, hey, we're going to be bad. You want to stick around? No, right? But I think if you say, like you've just said, we're here, we're going to find an identity, we're going to try to win. Yes, we're going to have some young players in front of us, Markstrom, but that means we need you more than ever to hold that net and to keep us in these games. Do you want to be part of this as we grow up together? I can see the answer being yes.
Yeah, and I think it's important that the Flames have that. I think this has been a Flames, like for everyone criticizing Brad Treliving, one of the things that he did really well is he treated the players with a lot of dignity and respect. And the last game of the last home game, he goes down to all the players and shakes their hand, and all of that. I mean, I think Craig Conroy wants to do the same thing. I think he just wants to treat. I think sincerely he wants to treat these veterans who have given a lot to the organization with some sort of Noah, what do you really want to do here? Okay, Jacob, what do you want to do? Naz and Blake Coleman. I mean, I think Blake Coleman next year will be a key figure in trade deadline if he's not in the offseason as well. So, I think that if you do it respectfully, when you're at the point where you want to sign, you got RFAs and UFAs like a Igor Sharangovich, which is going to be an interesting contract, and others that you're going to have to deal with. You're building something, and that's what I love. What Conroy is doing right now, he's trying to build something. And
Sharon Govich is a great example. I think Oliver Schilling is a great example too. This team gave him the time to work through whatever he wants to work through.
Yep.
To me, I would sign whatever nice man puts in front of me as a contract next year.
Yeah. I heard your comments last week. I wouldn't pay him what Matt would, but I don't know if I'm on your. I don't know where
Matt tends to want to overpay everybody.
Yeah.
To me, 3 is the highest I go. He still needs, I mean, I don't know what your comparable is, right? And he's an RFA. So if he goes to arbitration, I don't know what his comparable is there.
This is a sidetrack. Would you just give him a 1-year prove-it deal? 1 to 2 year prove-it deal?
It depends how much he wants.
Yeah.
If he wants 3.5, I'd say, sure, I'll give it to you for 1 year. We've got nobody on the back end. We've got you. We've got Pakal. We've got Anderson, and we've got, Uyghur. Show us you can be a top 4. We'll talk again. I think if he's willing to do 2.5, 2.8, 3, somewhere in there, I'd do maybe 3 years because he's still a young guy, and you're going to need young defensemen moving forward. Even if you sign him until he's 30, I think he will be fine for what the Flames need at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the Flames have to get away from overpaying guys.
Yeah, and Conroy so far, the 2 deals he signed, which was the Sharangovich deal and the Marty Pospisil deal, he's got them at pretty good deal. I think he got the Pospisil one at a pretty good number. So,
I mean, the Flames will have cap room, but that doesn't mean they need to fill it with signing these guys. And they have to be smart to keep some cap room so when they do get a little bit better and they want to start bringing in those veterans, or they want to sign a guy like Sharangovich to an extension, they'll have the money to do it. And they're not trying to make another Sean Monahan deal and give someone a first to take your bad money.
Yeah.
And, at the same time, if Shillington wants to look around, I would be happy as the Flames team say, you know what, let's, whether it's a free agent or, whatever, let's see what other teams would want to give you.
Based on what I've been reading, I think I wouldn't be surprised if that deal gets done before the season's done.
Oh, I don't disagree. Yeah. So Shillington's actually UFA, not an RFA. My bad. So, I mean, even if Shillington said, hey, guys, I think I'm worth 3.8, and they say he's worth 2.5, say, you know what? Go to free agency. Let us know what offers you get.
Yeah.
But I think that there's some love there between the two, and I think you'll see a bit of a hometown discount put in.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I do hope, just in terms of the trade deadline, I think we've got the Hanifin and Markstrom situations to figure out. But I wonder, you brought this up, and I think that this is, if there's a way that they can be a broker in a couple of other deals in terms of salary space to get to do what Jersey.
They can do it twice more. You can have 3 retained deals, and they now have Tanev on the books.
Yeah. So I wonder if they try that creative part of that, but we'll see.
And I think the Flames are going to want to bring in another defenseman, like some sort of a depth defenseman. I can see being a broker. That's an easy way to do it. Hey, we'll do this. You give us your 7th defenseman and a 4th for, the privilege of doing that or something like that.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned there's really nobody in the American League you want to bring up. I think right now we want all those guys in the American League. So, and Tree did this every year. He brought in, 1 or 2 guys every year at the deadline, Eric Gustafson and guys like that, who, they were just there to be that depth. And I think you'll see Connie do the same, whether trade, waivers, whatever. But I think being a broker is a great way to do that.
Yeah. And that's a good way to transition into other NHL. It's funny because I think a lot of Leaf fans and a lot of NHL fans were like, what the hell are you doing acquiring an Igor Lyubushkin? That's a Brad Treliving special, and he does it actually very well. Derek Forbort. I mean, you talked about Troy Stetcher. We were both we wanted to see Troy Stetcher back with the Flames. He was really good in the latter part of the season. That's just what he does. He finds these depth defensemen and as part of your run, and it's my belief you need 8 defensemen to have a good Stanley Cup run. Yep. I know there's probably people out there, but you need defense at the back end, and that's all that Igor Lyubushkin was. That's a Brad Treliving special.
Sure, yeah.
And
let's be honest, Osterley's nothing special. I think we know what we've got in Osterley. We know what we've got in Gilbert. You just need another body here in Calgary because they're not going deep this year. You just need a body to get you through the end of April.
I would be open. That being said, at the end of a year here, I would be more open to giving a Solioff or a Kuznetsov one more look during the end of the season than bringing up a Jordan Osterley.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I also think that you want the Wranglers roster has been decimated the last little bit here, and I think that the Flames still want to make a run for to have the Wranglers make a run. So I think you bring them up for a look, but I don't think you keep them here for 20 games.
No. I agree with you. I totally agree with you, and I think Dustin Wolf needs a good playoff run just to continue to build that confidence that he needs.
So, and I've said this on our show a few times. I think let's just assume Markstrom does get dealt. I don't think it's what everybody thinks. I don't think that you bring Wolf up and he runs the rest of the season. I think that they have to give the net to Dan Vladar at that point. I think they've shown enough confidence in Dan Vladar. You say, all right, Markie's out. This is your net. Show us what you've got. And I think if you send Markie out, you'll have to get somebody's goaltender back.
Yeah, I think that, yeah. Although, I mean, the interesting thing is there were reports that there were teams offering a defenseman back for Tanev, like an NHL defenseman in the Flames. Well, obviously they didn't want to do it, right? So,
well, and I think it depends what NHL defenseman too. I mean, maybe they talked to that guy and he had no interest in coming back or things like that.
Yeah.
Maybe he's an overpaid defenseman. They're not trying to bring that in. So I didn't hear any specific names. I don't know if you did, but I mean, technically, Jordan Osterley's an NHL defenseman this year. I wouldn't bring him back.
Yeah, he had some time off too. Well, you also have the other guy you have down in the farm too is Mark Pysyk, and who had a really lengthy time off as well. So, yeah. Let's just quickly. There's the big news that came out this weekend. Sean basically tried to wake us up all in the chat at like 8:15 your time, 7:15 our time. Elias Pettersson finally signs the 8-year, $11.6 AAV contract, remaining a Vancouver Canuck. Dan, it was quite a week with the whole controversy around Pettersson. You had the situation that Friedman said that teams were calling. You had the situation of a controversial poll question on Donnie and Dolly that I think rankled a lot of people. And then you had the situation of a report that from Sarah Valley that there was a contract this being discussed, and then there was a trade discussion with the Carolina Hurricanes on the table. All that to be said that this is now done. What do you? By the way, you can check out the podcast. We did an emergency podcast talking about that. You can check that out on our feed. But what were your thoughts on this contract?
I think it's too much money. I think if the Canucks can win the cup in the next couple of years here, I mean, he's 25. Let's say by the time he's 27, 28, nobody's going to care. But I think if not, I think that this is going to be a contract they're going to regret down the road. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, but I don't know that he's that superstar level to get that kind of money like, other guys we've seen with that kind of level. I think he's a great player. I think he's great for Vancouver. I mean, he's had 100-point season, 102 in 2022, 23. He's at 75 now. He's looking good, but I just don't know if that's a great contract. But they had to get it done. And I think if nothing else, it shows Vancouver fans that we're moving onwards or moving upwards.
Yeah. I do think it's a good contract. I think he is in the top 10, not in the high top 10, but probably mid to, depending on how you look at everybody else. I think I said this on the pod yesterday. I think Oiler fans will have Leon Draisaitl as in their top 5. I think Canuck fans will have Elias Pettersson in their top 5 as centers. I know that there's Leaf fans that are like, he's not better than William Nylander. They're kind of similar in points right now.
I think it depends. Are we just talking about overall points, or are we also talking about what they mean to that team?
Oh, I think Pettersson means a hell of a lot to the team.
I agree.
Yeah, like the unfortunate problem right now is finding line mates for him. It hasn't quite clicked with Lindholm yet. Ilya Mikheyev is gone 30 games without a goal. Höglander is starting to get up there in terms of he's close to having a 20-goal even strength. So he's there, but it's just he hasn't had the line mates yet. And I guess it's going to be an interesting question what happens with that.
I mean, that reminds me of Jerome, right? The joke here in Calgary for years is, okay, we got Jerome. Now we just got to find a center and a left winger.
Yeah.
And then eventually we had Goudreau, and it's like, hey, we got the left winger. Where's Jerome?
Yeah. And I think, I think that a lot of teams are now, I think Toronto, Brad obviously went through this with Johnny and Matthew. I think there's a lot of teams. I understand where Pettersson was coming from, and I totally respect that. You want to wait until the offseason to have any conversations. I don't think teams are in that position. After what happened with Gaudreau and Tkachuk, I just don't think that teams are wanting to go down that road.
No, I don't either.
And
I think that, all the rumors about a deal and stuff, I think that might have been posturing too, to say, look, we're not willing to do this, and we are willing to move you.
Yeah. Yeah. So they had to get it done. It's a hard Canuck fans, take it from Flame fans. It's a hard trade to win when you're not giving up. You're giving up essentially the best player, right? So that's the news out of Canucks. The other story, it's a Calgary story. Seattle Thunderbirds Matt Rempe has been making waves this week. He made his debut at the Stadium Series. He gets into a fight with Matt Martin. He plays the Philadelphia Flyers. He fights Nicolas Deslauriers. He gets into another fight during the week. And, of course, there's now pictures with him with a really stiff black eye. And, of course, he goes into Toronto, has a fight with Ryan Reeves. And, I think that there's a lot of people that are really excited that this is, how would you want the word excited? It's we talked about nostalgia. This brought a lot of sort of old school fans back to the days when fighting was a regular part of the game. But there's a section
and every team carried an enforcer.
Yes. Yeah. And the Flames had 2 back in 2004. Like you mentioned, Christoph Oliwal. Let's not forget Chris Simon. Yep. And nobody wanted to mess with Chris Simon.
McGrattan since then, like the Flames have had some really good enforcers.
Yeah.
Sandy McCarthy, Rocky Thompson,
who's now a coach, by the way, interestingly enough. Tim Hunter, who's also was coaching for a while.
Tim Hunter, this is going to sound weird, but Tim Hunter is one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah. Chris Chelios mentioned Bob Probert in his retirement speech. It is part of the, we're not going to argue it's part of the lore, but also what has come out of this is, of course, concussions and CTE and the impacts that it's had after hockey. And that is where there's a lot of fans that are concerned for what, you got to try to look with the Flames. Marty Pospisil is doing what he can to stay in the lineup. It's totally understandable what he's trying to do, and it's really understandable what Rempe's trying to do. But are you concerned he's gone this far in? What, like, do you think he needs to? Would you tell him to take a step back?
I think Matt Rempe is doing what he needs to do to make a team and to be in a lineup. And I mean, yes, he played in Seattle, and you mentioned the Calgary connection there. This is not a kid that's known to put up a ton of points, right? I think he's doing what he has to do to be in the lineup, and it's really up to the New York Rangers if they want to put that in their lineup or not. So I wouldn't tell him to change. I would say to the Rangers management, if you're not happy with it, take him out of the lineup.
Yeah, I one part of me is like, yeah, you know what? I'm not opposed to fighting in hockey, but I also just the CTE part of the concussion part of it is a part of the conversation, and it does worry me too. Like he's, I remember during,
and I don't know it'll continue. Like I think once he establishes himself in the league, I think we even saw that with Tkachuk, right? Tkachuk was very much that crap disturber in his first couple of years, and we saw his game sort of change a little bit as he established himself as something else and showed some of the other skills he had.
Yeah,
I think Pospisil's the same way. Pospisil's showing he's not just there to be the Flames sandpaper guy. He's showing some offensive skill, and I think he got rewarded from that with his contract.
Yeah, I just. Yeah, and Pospisil is basically refusing to fight.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to fight.
And that's the thing to remember, too. This isn't like it was back in the day when you went to a hockey game and you expect to see a fight, and fans were tuned in for that. Rempe needs dance partners, and I think we see fights all the time, whether it's Rempe or not, and guys are hitting each other with their helmets on, which I think is really stupid. Like, I think the way that we're seeing fights today, I'm not sure there's as much harm to the head, but he needs a dance partner. If nobody dances, he'll be out of the league very quickly.
I don't want him out of the league because he's fighting. I want him to stay in the league because he's playing hard and.
But I think if that's his identity, if his identity is the fighter, nobody's going to fight. He's either got to adapt or he'll be out.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there.
I'm not saying kick him out, but if you're going out there and all you want to do is drop the gloves, and nobody's going to drop them with you, the team's not going to keep dressing you.
Yeah. I remember back in that horrible bubble year, the all-Canadian empty seat year, the Flames were playing the Oilers, and Milan Lucic and Jujhar Khaira got into a fight. And it was probably because this was an empty arena, but the impact of his head hitting the ice just kind of shook me a little bit about, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree, but I think, like we talked about, Kipper earlier. I think one of the biggest memories I've heard this week is the Kipper Vokoun fight. I think fighting happens when there's emotions in games. I don't think I want it to be a state. If I want it to be staged, I'll turn on MMA. Yeah. Like if I want to watch a fight, there's a place to watch a fight. I think fighting is important when there's, Battle of Alberta, you get a fight because these teams are at each other's throat. I think it helps tell the story. And yes, you can hit your head on the ice, but so can you, get a skate to the neck or anything like that. Like we can't take all danger out of the game.
No.
I think it's about managing that risk. And you know what, if you don't want, I mean, most of the time they don't take their helmets off anymore when they fight. They're hitting each other with their helmets on. So what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, I think we are the fighting part of this is getting out of the game. And I hope, but I mean, you still need the emotion. That's the one thing. And I know Rempe is bringing the emotion. I will give him credit for that. Like he's, I just, the fight, I'm not worried about him granting emotion and working hard and being an energy guy. That's not what's worrying me. What worries me is he's got to balance the fisticuffs out.
Yeah, I agree. But I think he's also, once he runs out dance partners, you have to change his style of play.
Yeah. Anything else before we get into? I have an interesting one last question that I kind of just came up with, but I'm
sure. Let's hear it.
Is there anything else that you have we should talk about?
Nothing else for me.
Okay. So the two franchise faces that are affiliated with the 2004 runner, Jarome Iginla and Mika Kiprusoff. They were both acquired by trade. Jerome McGinley, of course, part of the Joe Nieuwendyk trade. He came with Corey Millen as part of the Dallas Stars. And Mika Kiprusoff was for a second-round pick, which turned out to be a guy that's still playing in the league, played last night for the San Jose Sharks, Mark-Edward Vlasic. If you had to pick which was the better of the two trades, the Iginla trade or the Kiprusoff trade, which would you pick?
For that time in the organization, I would say, well, I guess depends by what metric we look at it. I think Jerome has done a lot more on and off the ice for this team. I think Jerome's done a lot more as a leader in this community, but I would have to say if we're looking at it purely from hockey, I think Mika Kiprusoff. Jerome's important. Jerome's the best Flame ever, but I think that you would not have gotten nearly as far as they did without Kiprusoff. If it was still Roman Turek and now with Jerome on the team, I think it would have been a very different result in 04 and some of the subsequent seasons.
Yeah. I would probably go with Kipper too, because really the Nieuwendyk trade was, I mean, it is a great trade because Nieuwendyk basically forced the Flames' hand. Of course, he wasn't going to play anymore with the organization at that time. So you had to make that trade. You had to trade Nieuwendyk anyway, and you got a really good value. You got a player that was willing. You got it basically, essentially, player that was playing now, and then you got your future pick in Jerome Iginla. So you did really well, but you got an essentially unknown guy in Kiprusoff for a second-round pick. That I think the Kiprusoff trade turned out to be the better trade, but the Iginla trade was a fantastic trade.
I think forever, though, those two guys have to be linked together because I don't know one could do without the other.
Agreed.
I don't think Jerome would have been the best player in Flames history if not for Kipper. And I don't think Kipper could have taken that team as far as they did without Jerome.
Yeah, they are connected. Yeah. By the way, another underrated trade, though, was the Theo Fleury trade to Colorado Avalanche, which got the Flames Robin Regehr.
Remember the time Robin Regehr had 2 broken legs, and I don't think anybody thought he'd ever play again.
Yeah, and that was the year I believe that they had Alec Oates had the part of that conditions of the trade is the Flames had an option in the offseason to pick the prospect.
They did, yeah.
So
that trade was Theo Fleury and Chris Dingman leaving the Flames to Colorado for Wade Belak, Rene Corbet, the 2002 round pick, which ended up being Jared Stoll, and future considerations, which was Robin Regehr, which was they could pick that prospect in the offseason.
Yeah. And rest in peace, Wade Belak. Jared Stoll didn't want to play with the Flames. He ended up going back into the draft, and the Oilers took him. And, of course, now he's part of the LA Kings broadcast team and married to Fox's Aaron Andrews.
And what's happened to Rene Corbet?
Oh, no.
Nobody's sure.
Yeah. Well, we will leave it there. You have another podcast. You and Matt will chat.
I'll pretty much rewind the tape and do it with a different co-host. But yeah, for sure. Every Sunday night we record Fireside Chat. You can find us wherever fine podcasts are found online. You can find us on social media. We talk Calgary Flames every week. So I know here you guys talk about Edmonton Vancouver and other teams, Edmonton or anybody else. We don't, unless we're making fun of the Oilers. It's just about Flames talk. So if you want to hear more about the Kiprusoff stuff, you want to hear us talk about our thoughts on the trade deadline, what might happen to Hanifin the next little bit here. There's some news coming out as we're recording from Kevin Weeks on that. We'll be talking Flame stuff.
Is it more than the 10? What's the latest here?
Pretty much just saying that he's hearing that Florida is seriously interested, and he wonders what will happen, what that could mean for one of Florida's RFA defensemen.
Oh, yeah, he had that yesterday.
Okay. And then, we'll be talking about that. We record on Sundays. You can hear us on Monday mornings. And right now, if you go to our social media, we're asking, what do you guys want to talk about? What's your burning question or hot topic you want us to make sure that we include in the show this week? We like our Flames puns. So let us know. We'd love to answer your questions or talk about whatever part of this team you want to talk about. We're going to be talking a little bit about Kevin Rooney and his development and all sorts of Flames topics.
Yeah, so check them out. We, of course, just a reminder, we talked about the Pedersen contract, Sean and I, yesterday, quick 30-minute listen. So We'll have a Canucks conversation at some point next week. Sean will handle that as I work evenings, traffic on the ones. And we will be, I'm planning some sort of trade deadline podcast on Friday. I'm trying to figure some things out. So we will be doing, I will at least be live Friday afternoon to talk about what happened at the trade deadline, whether that be Flames related, Canucks related, NHL related. I think it's going to be a fascinating trade deadline anyway. So check us out. You can follow me on all the social medias at KEVOLE, Shifts and Pucks on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your audio. I'm also on Threads. I'm trying to get a Shifts and Pucks account on Threads as well. I have to make some changes on my Threads account. I realize I have some old news on there. Anyway, but that's where we're at. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.